It's Big News Wednesday. Sorry, sometimes there are voices in my head only I can hear. Anyway, it's Wednesday. That means Jayar Jackson. Jayar, how's it going?
You know what, John? If whatever little weird almost hiccup didn't happen at the beginning of this show, this would not be the day that I'm having. Just you know. But I'm glad I'm here. I think the day's gonna turn around starting right now.
I hope so, because I'm pretty sure that last Wednesday was rough for you as well, if I remember correctly. Is that the one where you didn't get to have a show?
Was that
two Wednesdays ago?
Oh no, it wasn't even a Wednesday. I don't think it was Wednesday. I think
it was a Wednesday because I remember saying that like at least people will get some Jayar because he'll be on my show.
It was 2 weeks ago. You're right. You're generally Wednesday is generally my jinx day. Just saying.
I know. Well, we're gonna try to fix things. We're gonna try to boost your spirits with a little bit of good news, which is gonna be coming up in just a sec. And if the good election news doesn't make you feel better, if some people on Fox being kind of reasonable doesn't make you feel better, if Marco Rubio being made to look like a fool doesn't make you feel better,
maybe
we have people mocking Lauren Boebert. And that's definitely. And if that doesn't make you feel better, we've got killer robots, which won't. Anyway, we've got a lot that we're gonna be talking about through the course of the show. So in advance of that, everyone who's already here, please hit the like button and thus provide a good example for those who will join us in this show. And if you wanna send us any comments, tweets, super chats, questions, anything like that, you can do that. We'll respond during our breaks. But with all that said, Jayar, are you ready to start the show?
I think so.
Okay, in fact, let's start off with a little bit of that multifaceted good news that I've been so overhyping. Anyway, let's do it. Herschel Walker is, as Rashad Ritchie once said, a dumbass, and he's an awful candidate. He might be the least qualified Senate candidate in American history, but despite all of that, and we've covered it in detail, it might finally be the case that something is breaking through. Something is making some voters realize, oh wait, this isn't a joke or something. This is a Senate race. And there I'm talking about the abortion controversy where Herschel Walker, a guy who is so fervently against abortion that he doesn't want there to be any exceptions whatsoever, also pressured people he'd been with to have abortions and literally paid for it himself. That should have automatically disqualified him amongst these religious conservatives. It hasn't done that, but there have been some polls conducted since that scandal broke. And let's take a look at how those polls compare to polls from the same pollsters before the scandal. And you can see very mild evidence that people can be reasonable. So for instance, this Trafalgar Group poll had him literally up by 1 point previously. Now, you have Raphael Warnock up by 2. You have Quinnipiac, Raphael Warnock gains a point in that. Emerson, Warnock gains 4 points and 6 points on insider advantage, although I'm not actually familiar with that pollster. But when you have 4 different polls all telling a similar story, at least, that while there hasn't been a massive swing and the race is still close, the movement has been towards the guy who isn't a massive hypocrite on these subjects that supposedly are so important to these conservative voters. I think maybe we can count on this and say that this is actually demonstrating something. Jayar, what do you think?
Maybe. You guys know I'm a bit of a pessimist when it comes, especially polling and what we may see on election day and seeing what people actually do after they said what they're going to do and where they're leaning and if they're actually disappointed in Herschel Walker or if they're just too embarrassed to say it out loud or even write it down. So yeah, that's where my pessimism comes from because this country has proven to us since forever that they make many wrong decisions when it comes to a pivotal point with advancing our country and getting us to a place where we can actually be better. That we tend to have some falters in there until it's way worse. And let's try and get back 10% of what we just lost. That's just the way we like to move through things. But there's this whole thing. These Republicans, these actual elected officials, whoever was in charge of this, Mitch McConnell, who said, yeah, we can go with Herschel Walker. Sure, we'll have him join me in the Senate. He's a black guy, right? He has a name that people remember. This will be great because that's all we need for the Republican Party. So after this whole thing broke down, I think they are a little bit surprised that some of these voters, some of these potential constituents of theirs actually do care about the abortion issue. They were like, yo, I thought we all had this like, silent agreement that we're just saying this. Nobody cares. This is BS. You guys know this. This is about us gaining as much power as possible and controlling your lives, not just the people that disagree with them, your lives, these constituents, these MAGA people, these Republican voters. We're looking to control and destroy your lives too. You think we don't want your money? We think we don't want your livelihood? We think you don't want your possibility for opportunities and your kids to go to decent schools? All this stuff that they promote openly, they figure will be trumped by them saying, oh yeah, that's right. We agree. Yeah, abortion bad. Didn't work that way.
Yeah, I guess we'll take. Anything. Like this is what's supposed to happen. Remember how excited we were? Yeah, you're in the mood. We're gonna try to get you out of it. Remember when like cinema was the absolute worst and still is, but the polls started to reflect that people in Arizona got it. That should not be a standout story. This should not be a standout story, and it barely is. You should expect that. When people demonstrate that they're not who they said they were, they're not who you thought they were, you should change your opinion. Like if AOC like gave a speech on the Green New Deal and I was like, I like that, I like her. And then I found out that like in her spare time, she goes to solar power fields and like bashes all the solar panels down to like a fine dust. And then she takes the dust and she blows it in the eyes of baby seals. If I'm still an enthusiastic supporter of hers at that point, there's definitely something wrong with her and also the seals, bring them to a vet, but there's definitely something wrong with me too. And the fact that only 1 in 30 voters appear to have changed their mind, of which half would be Democrats anyway. So 1 in 15 Republicans care enough, that is deeply depressing. But the race is opened up a little bit. And you can see now that Warnock is up by about 4.1 points, which is good. We'll see. What we are already seeing though is that a lot of people are voting in Georgia. On the first day of early voting, they came out in record numbers, exceeding the one-day early voting results from back in 2018, which remember was people's first opportunity to stick a thumb in Trump's eye. So they're still fired up. They're even more fired up. 131,000 ballots cast in person. That is close to double what we saw back in 2018. And it's nearly as many ballots as were cast on the first day of the 2020 election, which was sort of a consequential one if you've forgotten. So that's important, and that's what we need if we want to see Herschel Walker lose. But it's not the only thing we need. We also need the other candidate to be strong, and we're starting to see a little bit of that. Raphael Warnock is not a super aggressive guy, a super aggressive candidate, but he seems to get that the race against Herschel Walker is still close and people want him to be aggressive. And so we're starting to see that. They put out an ad from the recent debate that those two candidates had. Take a look at this.
And at the end of the day, again, this race is not about who's been redeemed. It's about who's ready. And I think Mr. Walker has shown time and time again that he's not ready to represent the people of Georgia. And I'm not going to be distracted about what Herschel Walker says about me. He doesn't tell the truth about himself. He said that he graduated from college, he didn't. He said he was valedictorian of his class, he wasn't. He said he started a business that doesn't even exist. And the other night when I said he pretended to be a police officer, he presented a badge as if that were proof that he really is a police officer. And now he wants us to think that he's a senator.
Maybe he'll get some sort of like patch for his coat or something to prove that he's a senator. I don't know. And look, that's not TYT level aggression. That's not like Herschel Walker destroyed, but it's pretty good. It was clever. The framing, mashing up a lot of his lies, because the issue with Herschel Walker isn't just that any one of these lies is true, although let's keep it real. There are a lot of these lies that any one of them should be enough to cancel him, let alone his actual life experience. You hold a gun to someone's head, you don't get to be a senator. That's my rule, that's how I was raised, but apparently America disagrees, so we're moving on. But mashing all of it together and creating this indisputable narrative that Herschel Walker is simply a massive liar, even amongst ambitious politicians, I think is a good way to go. And so I like to see it from Raphael Warnock. I'd like to see even more and more aggressive.
The hard part, man, and I think as you said, it's not TYT level aggression. I get that, and it's good that it isn't. You're still in Georgia. You're still trying to, get some of these folks who want to leave Herschel Walker simply because he has an R next to his name. That's really the only thing, and Donald Trump said so. To accept themselves or accept their own doubts, because people have a problem with that because they've been pushed with this loyalty thing so much. Like, who cares what I think? Who cares what I need? Who cares what my stances are? Who cares about my Christianity and my belief in the Bible? Who cares about any of that stuff? My Lord and Savior Donald Trump told me to forget all of that and to go with Herschel Walker, his disciple. It's a weird thing, but in order to finish that transition, if someone is kind of teetering in their own brain on the fence, you have to not be the one to go, anybody, it's too stupid to follow. Herschel Walker deserves what they get. If you say things like that, they're like, yeah, you're right. I hate that guy. And it sucks. It sucks because that's the truth, but it sucks that you have to try and coddle that bridge between what they know is reality and what Donald Trump is telling them is reality. And Herschel Walker, I guess, here too.
Yeah, he's trying. And by the way, like he's not gonna come out swinging like Cenk. He's a religious leader. Like that's not who he is. And we don't want him to be that exact person. He's not that person in strategy. He's not us on policy. Let's keep it real. But he is a Democrat who won a Senate race in Georgia, and he is hardly the worst of them. Not specifically in Georgia, I mean in the Senate. And so it's so important that he wins. Oh God, my stomach is gonna be riddled with holes by the end of this election, just from the stress, just eating away at my own digestive tract. Like if he wins, if Kari Lake wins, if Bolduc wins, if Oz wins, if JD Vance wins, and almost certainly some of them will. And so, no. Let's get off of this train of thought. This is about good news and putting Jayar in a good mood. So to that end, we're gonna move ahead to our next story right now, because when the Republicans take over, likely the House following these midterms, there's gonna be a lot of crazy stuff happening on a daily basis, including probably the daily impeachment of Joe Biden. But some kind of reasonable people on the right are already fighting back against that. Take a look at this.
Congresswoman Elise Stefanik says Republicans could move to impeach Biden next year. I think that's a rotten idea, Brian. I don't think people want another impeachment fiasco. I'm opposed to it. What do you say?
I am too, and she points out to Saudi Arabia when she said, would you do me a favor, if you're gonna limit your production of 2 million barrels a day, can you do it after the election? At which time they said, we brought it up and nothing to do with the election. Saudis came back and said, yeah, it had everything to do with the election. We understand it, and the answer is no. And of course, they talk about the Hunter Biden things and what the president could be involved in. But what happens is they vote on partisan lines. The whole country stops for 2.5 weeks. And I don't know maybe somebody writes a book that a couple of people want to buy. But for the most part, it's a waste of time unless, of course, you have obscene corruption. And I would love to see that cycle of, we don't like that person, so let's impeach them. Stop.
Exactly.
I mean, what they did to Trump was it's bad for the country.
Yeah, it's bad for the country. We don't want to do it again.
Okay, so I really just wanted to give Kilmeade some credit for once, but of course he's got to take away the justification because it's not the same thing as with Trump. Do you recall, Kilmeade, that he had just committed a coup? He just tried to overthrow the US government. He just tried to kill his own VP. It's not the same thing as something Hunter Biden, okay? And the previous impeachment was he was clearly trying to blackmail a foreign leader to do a sham investigation of Joe Biden explicitly to influence an election. Why do I have to remind people whose job it is to follow politics of these basic facts? And by the way, can we just touch base with the gas thing? Because the issue here is Joe Biden is being slammed on a daily basis for gas prices being high. And then he's being slammed from the other direction because literally anything he would try to do to lower the prices, they don't want him to do. Okay, so he announced earlier this week he's going to be releasing, I think, something like 15 million more barrels from the strategic reserve. They don't want him to do that explicitly. They don't want him to do that. And now they're trying to say that him asking OPEC to not lower their production is just about the election. Now, do I think it's probably partly about the election? Sure. But are you going to believe the word of Saudi Arabia? They're clearly lowering the production to raise the price of gas so they can get their political ally back into the White House. And after they do that, and Biden does his literal job as president, which is to advocate for the American people and telling them not to do that. Could you please not do that thing? For them to say, oh, I bet he's only doing that because he wants to influence the election. Well, that's Saudi Arabia saying that. They're the ones that are screwing us over. Why are you taking the side of America's enemy in this case? And they just naturally do, because they complain about gas prices being high, but they do not have a problem with gas prices being high. They desperately want gas prices to continue to go up, so they have an easy thing to slam Biden on that is very difficult for Biden to actually solve, because the president actually has very little direct control over the price of gasoline. Jayar, what do you think? I get that this thing was about impeachment, and I really want to give them credit, but they're being insane.
They can't ever fully see it. They felt that as well. They felt that there was a little bit of normalcy and reality to their discussion. Like, well, this is weird. We got to shake this. The whole hypocrisy comes full circle. They're complaining, at least one aspect of this. They're complaining that Joe Biden is just trying to do this so he can focus on the election or manipulate, maybe get people to vote for him based off of this one thing that isn't actually going to be a long-term solution, or is just like a little bit of a manipulation to the system. It's all fake. But they didn't have a problem with, literally, as you mentioned, those 2 times that Trump was impeached, for him literally trying to work with foreign folks to force them, blackmail them, quid pro quo them into helping him with his election, helping him with him sabotage his opponent. And then the second time, as you point out, the January 6th stuff with him running up all of his foot soldiers on the Capitol to literally attack democracy. So you're mad at Joe Biden for trying to get some votes based off of some moves and actions that he makes, and that's egregious. But you're not upset about the things that Trump did to manipulate his election. And by the way, the other part about that, I think the reason that Kilmeade and forget this guy's name, were both on that one thought for a second, was they're like, well, yeah, we're the pundits. We're supposed to be over the top and have these cartoonish thought processes of, well, if they impeached him, because they did say this. This is why Elise Stefanik went in and saying all this. She thought that the Hannitys, and maybe he is on board, and the Fox and Friends of the world for the past several years have been saying, well, as soon as we're getting back in power, bro, we're gonna do the same thing to you. And she went, I thought that's how we win. We're all just clownish. This is clownish behavior. That's what we're supposed to do. I'm sure she's surprised that they said, Elise, what are you talking about? This is gonna destroy the country. Because this is what y'all's idea was. They say it all the time.
Or at least that it would be a waste of time, which it very, very much would be. And let's also be clear, it's Stuart Varney, by the way. Let's be clear about why they would be doing it. They're not doing it because they think that Joe Biden has committed crimes and he needs to be brought to justice or whatever. That's not what it's about. What it is about is not applying an equal standard. What it is about dropping the standard for literally everyone. This is what they always do. When they do something insane, like for instance, trying to overthrow the US government or whatever, they committed insurrection. They then take anything that the Democrats say, like we want to pass a voting bill, and they call that an insurrection. They do that not because they're worried about it being an insurrection, but because they don't want the word insurrection to mean anything. And in the same way that they try to disarm language, they try to disarm consequences. Impeachment is supposed to mean something. So for instance, you hold it for important things like trying to overthrow the US government or cheating or something with Clinton. I don't know, that's what they tried to do it for. It's supposed to be for something important. If now though, he's being impeached literally every day for whatever someone on OAN comes up with, then in the future, when it is attempted to be used against Republicans if they break the law, it doesn't mean anything anymore. They don't want anything to mean anything. They want everything to go. You can just do whatever you want. Words have no meaning. There are no consequences for everything. And again, that is no way to run a country or have a political discourse if you care about what is going on and if you feel like there are problems that need to be solved. But as I always say, if you've already won the economic game, if you're already in control, then sure, just everything else can be a circus at that point. It doesn't matter to you anymore. You're sitting in your mansion, you've got your hundreds of millions of dollars, you're doing just fine. Okay, now that said, we are going to turn to something very different. I don't know if I've managed to improve Jayar's mood just yet, but I've got some good videos coming up that just might do the trick. Don't go anywhere. Anyway,
we gotta continue this conversation in another show because this is great.
Talk about hair?
Yeah, no, like for real, I didn't know this about you. I didn't know that you had these issues.
Well, I've been buzzing my head for years and I got it buzzed by other people for many more years. At a certain point, I don't know what you're supposed to do when your hair is longer than a quarter inch. So we're gonna figure it out, okay, together as a community. But first, we're gonna figure out what is going on with Marco Rubio versus Val Demings down in Florida. Let's start it off with this.
Of course, the senator who has never run anything at all but his mouth, would know nothing about helping people and being there for people when they are in trouble. He talked about pharmaceuticals. He voted against legislation that would help reduce the cost of prescription drugs and help cap the cost of insulin.
And that is time.
Now, as a police detective who investigated cases of rape and incest, no, Senator, I don't think it's okay for a 10-year-old girl to be raped and have to carry the seed of her rapist. No, I don't think it's okay for you to make decisions for women and girls. As a senator, I think those decisions are made between the woman, her family, her doctor, and her faith.
Ooh, okay. Marco Rubio did not seem to enjoy the experience of debating Val Demings. He was being hit on a number of topics, and very justifiably so. But still, I understand you have to prepare your response. And when you don't legitimately have a value system that you can just respond from, you have to check the little paper that you have or whatever, because someone told you what your position is supposed to be. Could you just do her the common courtesy of looking at her every once in a while? I feel like that would demonstrate a little bit of respect, but maybe we have different objectives as people. I don't know. Jayar, what did you think of Val Demings' multi-hit combo there? I felt like I was watching Street Fighter or something.
Man, I got to get back on that game. That was one of my favorites. You hit the nail exactly what I was thinking for that whole first clip. The whole time, Marco Rubio did not look like he was enjoying being there. He didn't want to be there anymore. He was not very happy about those body blows that she was landing on him. It usually, maybe you'll pay attention or you're ready to prepare your rebuttal. Say something back to completely dispute that lie that was just being told about me. Misrepresentation, but if you're the one that's doing it, then you have to sit there and take the pushback. I'm not sure what the plan ever really is with these types of politicians. So you have to know how you look. There's coaching, there's prep, there's mock debates that you have with someone who's supposed to stand in for Val. Things like that. And I'm not sure if this was the plan.
Yeah, he looks tired.
Bro,
he looks bored.
Either that or he thinks, I've already got this. Got the lead. Already got this. This is Republicans. Maybe. They're gonna vote for me no matter what. They can hear that I kicked their puppy and on top of the house and then shot it with a bow and arrow and it slid down with a streak of blood. And they'd be like, it doesn't matter. I'm a Republican. They don't care. They don't care that they get exposed for being the horrible people that they are, to being the hypocritical people they are, being the people that literally come after their own constituents. They don't care. And the sad part is they're right.
Yeah, nobody has any expectations for Marco Rubio. You knew when you reelected him that he wasn't going to do anything. He had years in office. He didn't do a single thing. And then he decided, well, I haven't done anything at this level. Why don't I become president? And he was absolutely destroyed in that effort. And then remember that he decided to run for Senate once again. But not just generally, not just because he wanted to be in there. You might recall he had a specific reason he cited for it. And Val Demings actually brought that up as well. Let's jump into this.
Senator, you used the Pulse nightclub shooting as your inspiration to run again for the Senate in 2016. Pulse is in my district. And yet, you've done nothing to help address gun violence and get dangerous weapons out of the hands of dangerous people. Florida. After Parkland, after you made promises that you had no intentions on keeping to the parents of Parkland, Florida passed legislation raising the age to have an assault weapon, passed red flag laws that we've seen 7,000 plus instances where they've been used now. Our primary responsibility is the safety of Floridians. And Senator, 24 years in elected office, and you have not yet risen to that occasion. And then when asked about it, you say something that makes no sense.
All right, Congressman, thank you.
So she's gonna hit him again on guns in just a sec, but I want to stop there for 1 sec because he did say something about this topic that makes no sense. And we're gonna tell you what that is. But also, as she points out, he's basically never done anything except be a politician, okay? So when he runs for the presidency and doesn't make it, and then he says, "Oh, I'm running again because of the Pulse shooting." Do you get how deeply offensive that is? He was never going to stop running for office. That's his life. That's the only thing that he does. He was definitely gonna run for some office. So to pretend that I'm only doing it, my arm is being like pushed behind my back, it's being twisted, I have to run again because of how devastating Pulse was. You could not be using a tragedy for your own personal advantage more than he did, except that he found a way to make it worse, which is to pretend he's running for that particular reason and then do absolutely nothing to make events like that less likely to happen. But it's even worse than that, because you might vaguely recall that Marco Rubio took part in a town hall debate following the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, okay? And at that event, he faced a crowd that demanded action, and he promised he was not gonna be like other Republicans, he was gonna work on solutions, and in fact, one particular solution. He said at that event, I absolutely believe that in this country, if you are 18 years of age, you should not be able to buy a rifle, and I will support a law that takes that right away, adding, I think that's the right thing to do. Well, asked at this debate about his vow to consider age restrictions for certain firearms, he said, that doesn't work. This comment that Val Demings is referring to. Okay, so what changed? The need to stop young people from having these weapons? No, it's more urgent, if anything, because more and more young people are getting these guns and murdering people. No, what changed is that he is even more craven, even more bought, even more in debt to the Trump wing of the party. And all the lies he told about caring about these shootings and being willing to do something, it's now been years, he hasn't done absolutely anything. And so if you vote for him again, Florida, you know exactly what you're getting, big fat nothing. Jared, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd speculate that also one of the reasons he went back and decided to run again and use this BS excuse. Of course, you need some kind of stupid motivational excuse that you don't actually care about to jump back in, is because maybe you'll search for that next job out of politics that you've worked your whole political life to get to. You know, John Boehner is now in the marijuana business after he was completely against it when he's legislated, because that's the political side. Once you look to make some money, oh my God, I'm gonna jump on that gravy train. People like that find their lobbying jobs or find their next consultant jobs or find their next private industry jobs, or everything they're gonna do to still be connected to politics, to continue influence politics, or maybe sometimes they go to TV like some of these guys go. He didn't find the best fit. It's like, it's like Tom Brady in the NFL. He retired and then he came back because he wasn't happy. He wasn't doing what he wanted to do, and he's gonna eventually be in a broadcast and stuff like that. But upon leaving, he thought he was ready to go, but he couldn't find the next best thing yet. He wasn't ready. So Marco Rubio, I feel like, is in a similar boat. Like, I didn't find the next moneymaker. All these lies and manipulation I've done for my entire political career haven't panned out to the kind of job I want yet. Maybe one more term, then I can get it.
Yeah.
Watch.
I'm looking at this right now, and as of, I don't know if these numbers have anything beyond 2020. They're current at least to 2020. The NRA had spent $3.3 million on Marco Rubio's political campaigns.
That's why I came back.
Every year in Florida, by the way, there's nearly 2,500 gun deaths every single year. So you can do the math. Absolutely insane. She's gonna hit him one more time on guns. Let's just briefly go to that.
How long will you watch people being gunned down in first grade, fourth grade, high school, college, church, synagogue, a grocery store, a movie theater, a mall, and a nightclub,
Congresswoman,
and do nothing?
That is time.
That is strong. I mean, look, I don't know to what extent Val Demings' positions on a lot of issues really overlap with mine. I mean, I know that she says that she cares about climate change, and she obviously seems to care about protecting, women's control over their own bodies and stopping gun violence and everything. But she was coming at him strong. I don't know if it's gonna be enough. I mean, if we jump ahead, he's still up by more than 5 points on average in the polls, which is just so embarrassing for Florida. Yeah. It's not even that they're choosing a Republican. Like, you will get absolutely nothing from Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio has been in office for many years. He has never done anything. Literally, you will not get representation. Maybe you just want a conservative Supreme Court. I don't know. You're gonna get nothing out of Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio does what he's told, and that's it.
If nothing else, my last thought here, Val went after him hard, and people are probably, I'm sure people who support Marco Rubio don't like that this black woman screamed and yelled at Marco Rubio and put him in his place and exposed his BS and his lies and his hypocrisy and how he's gonna do nothing for the constituents that may vote for him. They probably don't like that look. I loved it. And maybe some people may say, maybe she should have been softer on him. Maybe she should have tried to bridge the gap between those folks who maybe have doubts about Marco Rubio. We mentioned it with Warnock earlier. Maybe she should have tried to bring them over to her side. No. That's not who she is. That's not who she should be. They should continue to be exposed for who they are. If Marco Rubio happens to skirt by again, we'll see that in action, or the inaction for Marco Rubio. And maybe then they'll get mad enough, as angry as Val Demings is at him, and be like, you know what, maybe we should have gone on board with the person who was looking to fight for us. She's not complaining, she's looking to represent people on these very serious issues that they've been begging for representation on.
Yeah, 100%.
It's easy,
He's just so pathetic. He's so pathetic. Like, you know, I hate Trump, and I hate how he's degraded our political process, but he was right in his estimation of Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is not a man. He's just not. He's a boy who does what he's told. Whether it's donors or other people in the party, he does not stand on his own 2 feet. Anyway, he did want to make one point though, and it was a particularly dumb point. So I thought maybe we should talk about that briefly. Let's jump to this last video.
That's a method of voting that doesn't advantage one group or another. There's danger involved in drop boxes. People need to think about it. Okay, imagine someone decides, oh, there's a drop box. I'm just going to put some explosive in it and blow it up and burn all of those ballots, and now those votes don't count at all. Okay, there is something with elections. There are 2 things that are very important. Number one, the count has to be accurate. The votes have to be counted accurately. But the other is there has to be public confidence. The public has to believe that the elections were fair.
So the idea that we should not allow ballot drop-off locations because they could be blown up is dumb enough that we shouldn't have to really address it. If you want to follow that logic, lots of things can be blown up. Lots of places can be blown up. We still go on with our lives, despite the fact that explosives exist in the world, Marco. But to then turn and say, and it's important that people have confidence in the voting system when his party has done nothing but try to reduce confidence in perfectly legitimate elections. He literally said, you can't trust these things because they might get blown up. And it's really important that you have confidence in our system, but not part of the system after all, not the parts that might be blown up someday. This is their strategy. This is their strategy. It is not to run on a platform and to get someone to be really hyped about what potential change they can bring to the country, the problems they can solve. It's not to increase participation and access and all of that, representation. It's to fearmonger and to waste time. They are people technically, but they're just boulders in the way of progress. That's all it is, Jayar.
You know what else was said that's very obvious there, that they won't, that I think, well, it's taken, but it's not said because it would sound too bad. So these election ballot boxes or these drop-off locations could be blown up. Who would blow them up? You're talking about we need people to trust in the election system. Who are the people that don't trust in our election system? MAGA people don't trust in our election system. Trump people, which makes you the same type of folks. So you're saying your supporters are gonna blow up ballot boxes because they don't trust the system. Are you saying that that's a good thing, or are you saying that's a bad thing? You didn't really specify, you just said people could blow them up. And we're insinuating that maybe that's a bad thing. So you don't agree with the people who would blow up those boxes because that's terrorism. And it's vandalism, it's destroying property, and it's disrupting an election. That's some serious things that they could be doing. Are you against that person? Is a Democrat that person? Because I thought Democrats are all about mailing off ballots and trying to usurp and cause fraud in our election system. Those same people that don't believe in our democratic system have been told not to believe in our democratic system by you. So if that does happen, now that you've insinuated, maybe you should go blow up an election box, ballot box, which no one had been talked about doing. Do you agree or disagree with that? Are those bad guys or those good guys? Are you a bad guy? Are you a supporter of terrorism? Do you want this to happen? All that is baked in that 1 or 2 stupid sentences for Marco Rubio, and they know it. They know it.
By the way, I'm gonna end by saying, I do think it's important for people to have confidence in the election system if the election system deserves you to be confident about it. And the way that we get that isn't by having right wingers clamp down on people's ability to vote as much as possible. We have that by sometimes needlessly investigating the results of elections, which they did in 2020. At the state level, at the federal level, there were tons of recounts and investigations and the DOJ and all of that. Isn't it a little bit suspicious that all of those investigations that shown that the election was not turned on voter fraud, that didn't increase their confidence? That's the only thing that could, and yet it didn't. Isn't that weird?
Yep.
Anyway, with that said, we're gonna take our second break of the show. When we come back, we've got a little bit of an update on what's going on with the document scandal involving Mar-a-Lago and classified documents. And then, oh geez, we got a pretty tragic story for you, but we got to talk about it after this. God, there's so many comments.
How about like a spiky
hair
hairstyle, John? Yeah, spikes, dreaded up, something, bro.
I'm thinking mohawk. I've been watching a lot of Cobra Kai. I think I could do it. Anyway, I need to watch that most recent season. I've been like holding.
I haven't either. It started to jump the shark a little bit for me. That's what my problem was.
I think
no
it
longer
the shark
nostalgic.
Like 3 seasons ago.
Yeah, I mean it was nostalgia with the old Karate Kid stuff from the. Now that they've shrunk it to the kids, I'm like, I don't care about these teenagers.
I think it's funny just because like I like fantasy shows, and when you have like a 20-person martial arts brawl in a mall cafeteria, that's basically Lord of the Rings at that point. That ain't the real world. Anyway, okay, with that, we've got stuff to talk about and it is important, so why don't we jump into it? Donald Trump just wanted a special master to save his bacon when it comes to those classified documents that he stole, and he got what he wanted. He got the special master. He even got the special master he wanted in Raymond Dearie, but at every step along the way, Dearie has not proven himself to be much of an ally to Donald Trump, and that continues into this week, in which during a phone conference with the lawyers representing both the DOJ as well as the Trump legal team, he complained that the Trump team has not been providing nearly enough evidence to substantiate their claims having to do with privilege for a number of these arguments, with Dearie saying, I literally cannot figure out if some of these things are privileged because you're not giving me the information I need, which is not surprising to us. We know that they don't want to provide that information because the claims are without merit. But Dearie had almost a little bit of fun on this phone conference and dealing with the Trump legal team. So he complained that they hadn't provided the proof needed, says saying it so doesn't make it so. That's a good little line, but he's got a better one. He says, it's a little perplexing as I go through the log. What's the expression? Where's the beef? I need some beef. And I get it. I sometimes get hungry on those phone calls too. But now I like that reference back to a 1970s Wendy's commercial, I think it was. I don't know how many of our viewers will get that reference, but what he's basically saying is the information that would be needed to prove that your claims are true hasn't been provided. And he didn't just say that in general. He had a couple of specific examples. One of them was a document that Trump's lawyers claim was his personal property. It's not a government record, it's his property. But they also claim that it's protected by executive privilege, which is generally used for presidential records. And he says, unless I'm wrong, and I've been wrong before, there's certainly an incongruity there. Yeah, it can't be protected as a government document when you're also claiming that it's not a government document, it's your document. It's one of those two things. And he could, in theory, say that it had been protected, but now it's mine, and only because I declassified it. But remember, he's also not providing evidence of that. And so I don't know what it's like to be a lawyer or a judge or any of these things, but it doesn't look fun for Raymond Dearie right now. He's got a job that he's supposed to do that's ostensibly a serious one, but Trump's lawyers aren't making it that easy to do.
Yeah, a constant test between normalcy, principles, practices, precedents, and all that stuff, and then having to go with what people will assume is about you if you go a wrong way politically. Again, judges are supposed to be separate from this, but that's the whole point of like the honor of judges. They're not based off some political party, especially all the way up to the Supreme Court. I've said it a million times. The whole thing about being on the Supreme Court and lifelong appointment is that you're no longer attached to those partisan views that you maybe have, and you're not under the threat of then being criticized for not following what people assume you are, because we're supposed to base this off of reality and judicial processes and analysis. Instead, we've turned into, I'm gonna put these 3 folks on the Supreme Court and they're gonna do everything I told them to for their entire lives. It's become the purpose of doing this is to make sure the judges are skewed in your direction. So now Dearie here has to try and shake that because he keeps seeing insanity in front of him. He goes, I'm supposed to agree with this just because he appointed me, just because he asked for me to be here, or now they put me in place and they know I have this general background. That sucks. So he finds himself probably daily trying to figure out if he should go with the right thing or these lies. And it seems like he's going the correct way here, at least up till now. But there was a big ironic line in there they talked about. He goes, they haven't provided this information to prove this privilege that they claim. Man, if that's not an example of full life of these politicians and people who support them. It's my privilege, but they don't want to admit that they assume privilege. They don't want to say that they've got this privilege that other folks don't have for no reason. And they definitely can't prove that they deserve that privilege. They just want it.
I've always had it, and so I'd like to still have it, please. That's pretty much what it is. In the personal life, as a politician, and when being investigated for multiple felonies. So all of those claims, Judge Dearie has a big issue with. There's a separate set that he also has a problem with, and I think this one might even be more funny. So he says he wants more information to support the former president's claims that some of the documents were shielded by attorney-client privilege. So that's separate from what we were talking about before. To that point, he asked for the names of any lawyers connected to such materials. So there kind of has to be an attorney for there to be attorney-client privilege. I think that seems reasonable. But he also suggested that Mr. Trump's team had asserted privilege over other records, even though a third party was involved, suggesting that they were not in fact confidential. And what that basically means is, for you to say that this is attorney-client privilege, you're saying that these documents are so sensitive that only myself and my attorney can know about it. We wouldn't want that being exposed to other people. But if you're willingly exposing it to other people who are not a part of your legal team, then that undercuts the claim. It isn't definitive, not even necessarily to the extent that the earlier part is, but it certainly doesn't look good. And their response to this particular line of reasoning from Dearie doesn't look great either. James Trusty, a lawyer for Mr. Trump. By the way, this is like a clever trick as a lawyer to make your name have trust in it. It doesn't work, I still don't trust you. He says, responding to the thing that they need to provide information about this particular issue, says that they would certainly take you up on it. It's not an invite to a cabin for the weekend. Like, you guys are being investigated for felonies. This isn't a lunch offer. Yes, you should take him up on it. You should provide the information, which again, let's skip ahead. Let's do a little spoiler. They're not gonna do it. There is nothing to justify the attorney-client privilege, okay? There's nothing to justify the executive privilege because he's not president anymore. There's nothing to justify the declassification argument because he didn't declassify it. They've got nothing. I know it, you know it, Judge Raymond Dearie knows it, but Raymond Dearie needs to pretend for a couple more weeks that what is abundantly clear is somehow not. And I'm just really hoping that we get a significant update on this, his conclusions, where this is gonna go, if he's even gonna stay in this position, because right now the DOJ is asking the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to basically unwind the whole special master thing. Although if I were them, I'd probably let it keep going because it's making Trump look really bad. So I just wanna know where this is gonna go and if there's any chance of actual consequences.
Yeah, I mean, Trump looking bad is something he doesn't care about. He does that consistently. And I do think, and I've said this for a while, the whole point is to stretch out the process. Is make this as long as possible. Who cares if we're embarrassed? Who cares if I run through attorneys and I get the next one from Wendy's down the street? It doesn't matter. As long as someone is there to extend this and say something ridiculous and make everyone involved go, oh. Okay, so how much longer is this gonna take? That's the point. Stretched out, take as long as possible and see what happens on the midterms.
Was that a reference to Wendy's because of the beef? Okay, by the way, people are correcting me. Apparently it was 1984, so apologies, January 10th, 1984. It's not a bad commercial for its age. You can find it on YouTube and it's, the commercials had like 6 pixels back then, but it wasn't bad, it wasn't bad.
I remember that.
Although, yeah, I've never really liked Wendy's burgers.
Yo, if you're gonna eat fast food, which you shouldn't, that's probably the one.
I like their chili, that's pretty good. I don't think their burgers are amazing.
Well, you don't want to see the story I did about this guy who exposed Wendy's. It was one particular Wendy's, just point that out.
I don't know about this Wendy's story.
The chili was a thing. Go check out Watch List, it's from a couple months ago.
Okay, I'll have to see that. That must be the one clip that I missed, apologies. Anyway, okay, with that, we need to change our gears just a little bit. This is much less fun than mocking Trump, but that said, let's jump into this video.
Go ahead, record.
Let go of his neck, he's not going anywhere.
Stole the bike right out of a friend of mine's yard.
Let go of his neck. Let go of his neck. Let go of his neck. Okay, you're fine. You ain't gotta hold his neck.
No, I didn't touch it. I did touch it. Yeah, I did touch it.
For real, I didn't touch him.
Yeah, one of this kid over here, one of his friends stole a bike right out of a friend of mine's yard.
Everybody seems to think that other people's business is theirs to get involved in. Everyone thinks that they can just citizens arrest people whenever they want. Well, he's probably gonna end up regretting that, the man in that video. You can see in that video, this older man detaining a younger man who has been identified by family members as being disabled by choking him, holding him by his throat because he believes that someone else stole a bicycle. That's what he thought he should do. Now, we don't know the identity, at least as of when we're filming this, we don't know the identity of the man doing the choking or the apparently disabled man being detained there. But Ricky Hale is apparently the younger man's uncle and says, why would you come out in the middle of the street and choke? You don't know if that's a kid or not. You don't even know his age. And people in the community are, I think, rightfully, very concerned about this, very fired up over, like, of all the, like, you want to call the cops or whatever, that already leads to tons of terrible outcomes. But the idea that you would personally detain this person, and if you're gonna do that, you do it in such a bizarre way, just to hold someone by the front of their neck. It's such a threatening thing to do. Jayar, what do you think?
Well, so it may be bizarre, but it's definitely, it checks. Because again, when people want to get in these types of situations, he said one of his friends, first one off, and also stole a bike out of my neighbor's yard. Not your yard, not the person you said is the culprit. Someone else went to someone else's yard and did this that I think happened. Therefore, I'm in the middle of the street choking or strangling actually this person. So when you're strangling someone in the middle of the street to detain them because you have the right to do that, first of all, as you call the cops, there's all of these, we just talked about privilege that comes into that. And with no shame, no remorse, no curiosity of whether or not someone's gonna come out and go, get your hands off of his throat. What's the matter with you? There's no shame. You should be worried about why people will take what you're doing in the middle of the street. But there's none of that. They're supposed to respect me. This other grown man is supposed to come out and listen to what I say is happening. No, bro, you're in the wrong. And again, like as you said, hopefully he finds that out soon enough. And again, he'll call the cops with no concern about, will the cops come out and arrest me for this? None at all. The cops are on my team. There's no question about it in his head because he's experienced this before. They've galvanized his belief system that this is the normal thing to do. A neighbor's yard and someone else stole your bike. Please, bro. He's on a bike.
Yeah, they definitely think that it's just, those are my guys. They do my work. They would never, why would they be mad at me? I'm a good person. These are bad people. You should be doing something to them. So thankfully, there were no injuries apparently reported as a result of this. It's gonna be investigated. But I also think like a person who would run out and choke someone to detain them. Like, what if that guy had a gun? Like, thankfully he didn't. Nobody got shot. But we were talking about the two fathers driving down the highway, shooting at each other, and both of their daughters ended up getting shot as a result of it. When guns are around, you're in much more danger. Like that sort of guy, would you trust him to have responded to what he thought was a robbery if he'd had a gun? And thankfully, in this particular case, people intervened. You know, if whoever the gentleman that we couldn't really see in the video hadn't been telling him to get off of his neck and all that, telling him that he's young, that he's disabled, I mean, God only knows what would have happened. Like, you got to watch out for each other because there's some crazy people who their entire life is just looking to mess with other people.
And they consider who's the bad guy. That's why the bad guy, good guy with a gun thing, can't wait to use it. I haven't shot it in a whole 2 days. Here's a good opportunity for me to shoot it. Luckily, again, he maybe didn't have it with him or doesn't have one.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, that is unfortunately all the time we have for the first hour of the show. So if you're watching on the linear platforms or listening on the podcast, thank you as always. If you are actually listening to the podcast, you can go on Apple Podcasts and rate and review us, and that'd be very helpful. Thank you very much. But if you're on the other platforms, we've got a lot more Big News Wednesday where that came from. First of all, Lauren Boebert being slammed in a hilarious fashion by one of her colleagues. And then unfortunately, we got the return of the White Lives Matter shirts in an even worse context than initially. And we'll be closing with killer robots. You're not gonna wanna miss it. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.